question about the roundtable you just had. I presume that happened. Did you invite anybody with an opposing point of view to get an idea of why people are upset here? And just as a quick follow-up, have you reached out to Governor Walz at all in an attempt to turn down the tent?
So I haven't talked to Governor Walz on this particular trip. A number of members of our administration, I believe our chief of staff, spoke to the governor and has been in constant contact with his staff over the past week. We've been in my office in constant contact with people here on the ground in Minneapolis. There were certainly people at our roundtable with opposing views, and look, I don't even know, whether it's public, but yes, we met with people with opposing views here at the roundtable. I wanted to get a perspective from everybody, but also, of course, offer my opinion that with a little bit more cooperation, we could lower the chaos. We're going to keep on doing that. If Governor Walz wants to call me, we'll absolutely continue talking. I will say that my sense of this situation, having talked to these guys for a long time, is this is primarily a law enforcement issue. This is the Attorney General. This is the local mayor. This is all of the organs of local and state law enforcement. That's who we focus on, but we've certainly been in communication with the governor and his office as well.
Mr. Vice President.
Yeah.
So local law enforcement obviously hasn't been really helping out with the agents who've been assaulted repeatedly. What's the plan if nothing changes there here locally and this operation has attracted thousands of agents? Are there any plans to go into any other cities from here?
Well, right now we're focused on Minneapolis because that's where we have the highest concentration of people who have violated our immigration laws, and that's also, frankly, where we see the most assault of our law enforcement officers. I mean, our plan is very simple. If you assault a federal law enforcement officer, we're going to do everything that we can to put you in prison. It's very simple. And most of these protesters, as much as I may disagree with their politics, most of them have been peaceful, but a lot of them have not been peaceful. And if you go and storm a church, if you go and insult a federal law enforcement officer, we're going to try very hard. We're going to use every resource of the federal government to put you in prison. Respect people's rights. Respect people's rights to worship. Respect people's rights to do their job without being assaulted. If you follow that basic principle, the Trump administration is going to do everything that we can to protect your rights. But if you go after somebody, if you assault somebody, if you make a 9-year-old girl cry because you walked into her church and harassed her, we're going to go after you with every single tool that we have.
Vice President.
Maggie Vespa with NBC News, sir. Your administration has said repeatedly this is about safety, about making Americans feel safer. So what do you say to people here in Minnesota who say it's the overwhelming presence of ICE officers and federal officers and their tactics that are making them feel less safe?
Well, one thing I would say is, first of all, we saw in 2025 the biggest one-year drop in murders in the history of the United States of America. Significant reductions in violent crime. The reason why we have less in violent crime is really two reasons. Number one, because we're enforcing the immigration laws and getting very violent criminals out of our country. And number two, because we're enforcing our criminal laws and putting guys who assault and murder behind bars. This is part of a broad effort to make us safe. And the chaos that people are seeing, and I understand there is frustration of the chaos, I'd say that we're doing everything that we can to lower the temperature, and we would like federal and state and local officials to meet us halfway. So much so.
Are you saying that they're not perceiving it correctly? Are you saying that they're not seeing that it's the tactics or the presence of the officers that are...
Look, I'm sure that people are seeing a lot of things that would make any member of our national community feel very upset, but I also think that if you understand this in context, this is the inevitable consequence of a state and local government that have decided that they're not going to cooperate with immigration enforcement at all. In fact, they're going to aggressively not cooperate. So here's a basic illustration of this. If you are an ICE officer and you have to arrest a person who's committed assault and is also an illegal alien, but the state and local officials won't help you identify that person, many of the things that people in Minneapolis are seeing that give them pause, that frustrate them, that worry them, that make them feel like things are too chaotic, many of these things are coming from the fact that there's no cooperation with state and local law enforcement. And I guess what I would tell people, again, many of whom are justifiably concerned and worried about what they're seeing in their communities, is why are we not seeing it anywhere else? We're seeing this level of chaos only in Minneapolis. LA and Chicago, we had some problems there. Pretty much every jurisdiction where these guys are operating, you don't see the same level of chaos. You don't see the same level of violence. You don't see the problems that we're seeing in Minneapolis. Maybe the problem is unique to Minneapolis, and we believe that it is. And it's the lack of cooperation between state and local law enforcement and federal law enforcement. Sir.
Omar Menace, CNN. ICE has been operating here for years with less pushback than we're seeing right now. And even the St. Paul police chief recently said, is there not a way to find common ground without scaring the hell out of people in the community? Those are his words. And I just wonder, with this Operation Metro Surge, is any part of it meant to send a form of political message to the leaders here in Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota? And I know you talked about you've been in touch with the governor's offices and the mayor's offices, but why have you not been able to speak to them directly? Have they not been willing to do so?
Well, look, I have spoken to some of the people in Minnesota directly. I spoke to some of them today. I've spoke to others in the past. And again, our staff has been in very direct contact with pretty much every official with any influence or any power in Minneapolis. But no, we're not trying to send a political message. We're trying to enforce the law. And unfortunately, what has happened is that as we've enforced the law, there's been this weird reaction, again, unique to this city. This is not a common thing across the United States of America. There's been a very unique, very Minneapolis-specific reaction to our enforcement of federal immigration laws. What I'm trying to do here today is understand why that is. What is it about Minneapolis that has become so chaotic? What are the specific types of cooperation that we need? Look, I don't need Tim Walz or Jacob Frey or anybody else to come out and say that they agree with J.D. Vance or Donald Trump on immigration. I just don't need that. What I do need them to do is empower their local officials to help our federal officials out in a way where this can be a little bit less chaotic and it can be a little bit more targeted. Like if we're trying to find a sex offender, tell us where the guy lives. Simple things like that, simple changes in how they're approaching immigration enforcement would make this work a lot better. It would make Minneapolis' streets a lot safer, and it would make this whole thing a lot less traumatic for this community. I'll take one more question.
Mr. Vice President.
Go ahead.
President, you've said that it's time to turn down the temperature. Does that include changes to both ICE and CBP tactics that we've seen employed on the streets, including less than lethal tactics, pepper spray, pepper balls? Beyond that, what is the federal government's role in turning down the temperature? And the Minnesota Department of Corrections says that its own officers have been cooperating with ICE all along, handing over criminals once they serve their sentences to ICE officials. Can you concede that there is some cooperation with the state?
Yeah, look, if I was going to list the 5 agencies locally and statewide that I'm most worried about, I wouldn't put the Department of Corrections on that list. I think that while there are certain things we'd like to see more from them, they've hardly been the worst offenders. You agree with that, guys? That's a fair assessment. But I think you talked about tactics and you talked about the response to things. Look, we don't want to employ tactics that we don't employ the kind of tactics that are only necessary when violence is committed against officers. That is these guys' directive, and that's what we're going to try to do. And again, the president said this a couple of days ago, whenever you have a law enforcement operation, even if 99.99% of the guys do everything perfectly, you're going to have people that make mistakes. That is the nature of law enforcement. What I do think that we can do is working with state and local officials, we can make the worst moments of chaos much less common. And all they've got to do is meet us halfway. These guys want to communicate with them. They want to talk to the local business leaders. Many of the people standing behind me are members of the Minneapolis community. Many of the officials that I met today who work in federal immigration enforcement, this is their home. They love this place. These are their neighbors. They want this to work a lot more smoothly. I think that we can get there. We just got to work at it a little bit, and we need some cooperation from state and local officials. The last thing that I'll say is I just hope they give it. This is a beautiful city. I've only been here a few times. I love it. Even in this weather, I love Minneapolis. We could do a lot better. We could do a lot more with more cooperation. The Trump administration, the directive that I got from the President of the United States is meet these guys halfway. Work with them so that we can make these immigration enforcement operations successful without endangering our ICE officers, and so that we can turn down the chaos a little bit, at least. I think a lot, actually. But for us to do that, we need some help from the state and local officials. We will keep on working with them, and so long as they're willing to work with us, they will always find a partner in public safety and law enforcement in the Trump administration. Thank you all.
Question from Brazil. Question from Brazil. Mr. Vice President.
Mr. President, you mentioned Mississippi.